Hi, everybody. Welcome again to another episode of the ShopNotes Podcast. I'm Phil from ShopNotes with a couple of special guests today. I'm joined on this episode number 174 by creative director Chris Fitch and a special guest from the far reaches of Connecticut, Ben Strano. He's a Multimedia Extraordinaire, Lord High Star Commander, I think is his official title. He's going to be joining us. Today we're going to be talking about digital woodworking, and especially as it relates to Chris's launch of his Mark II version of the CNC machine. So you want to stick around for this episode. Thanks for listening. Thank you to Titebond. You want a glue that you can trust, and fortunately, Titebond has the glue you need to get the job done with confidence. From interior glues with strong initial tack and short clamp time to exterior glues with exceptional strength and water resistance, look to Titebond, the right glue for your next project. For more information, visit titebond.com. All right, welcome, fellas.
Yep.
And I understand that this is how I feel. We're all kind of gemstones, but we present and see each other in different facets. So
this has gone way deeper than I thought it would right off the bat.
Yeah. So I know both of you from, let's call it an analog facet in one sentence. So Chris does automatons and whirligigs and folk carving, and it's basswood and knife cuts and textured edges. And Ben, I've seen you as a ukulele maker where it's fit and finish and all that kind of stuff. And yet here both of you are on another facet as kind of digital CNC kind of woodworking nerds. So we'll just start with you, Ben. What was it that got you started into kind of the CNC realm?
So I've always been a tinkerer. Like my past career was a recording engineer, and I started in Nashville studios on huge analog consoles and everything. But I was one of the first ones who, like, everybody was like, "Oh, that kid really knows." And at the time, everyone said that kid. That kid really knows how to run the computer stuff, And I was the one who went around and taught everyone how to use Pro Tools or whatever software we were using at the time. I've always been into technology. But you got me really thinking about this, and I'm wondering if it's the same for Chris, because I am also very into efficiencies. And I think that my mind always tries to find, if you're going to do something 2,000 times over the course of 2 years, and you can shave a minute off every time you do that thing, it's going to add up to more shop time and more work done and whatever. And even though I'm a hobbyist, I consider myself a professional hobbyist woodworker. I'm always looking for efficiencies, and I take joy in finding more efficient ways of doing teeny tiny things. And yes, most of the time I spend more time affecting those efficiencies than I do than I save in the end. Because that's part of the algorithm for me. That's part of the math is, can I find a way of doing this more efficient? And if I went into production mode, this would pay off eventually. But everybody spends time in their shop doing what they enjoy, and one of the things that I enjoy is making my shop efficient and my work efficient, and that's part of what gets me going. So, yeah.
Okay, Chris.
Well, I really hear what you're saying, Ben, because I know, for me, before I came to work here in the magazine, woodworking was a profession, and so it was all about getting the job done. Not tomorrow, today, now, because you get paid today, and that's a lot better to come home with a check in your hand. So the efficiency is amazing, but I think the exactness too. Sometimes it's okay to be more freeform. Sometimes it's okay just to cut something because it's good enough, plus or minus a quarter. But sometimes you just want things to be dead nuts on. I think part of it is wanting to control my world a little bit more. And that's probably a bad sign. There's a therapist out there waiting for me. But, it's sometimes you just want things to work out just the way they ought to. And the CNC machine allows you to do that. You can set it up and you can get repeatability. You can get things that come out the way you really expect them to, time and time again. And there's a place for that. Now, there's a place just for whittling, away and being relaxed and not worrying about things too much. But I think that's the whole beauty of the craft we're in. You can go either way, can't you? And so for me, it's for someone who's not very, I've never considered myself to be very electronically. I just got a smartphone a year ago. Okay, does that tell you anything? but basically a curmudgeon, maybe a bit of a Luddite with those things. But I have to say, there's just a beauty in that exactness. There's a beauty in the control. I'm amazed at the options that I have. It's just opening up another universe. It's stepping into the portal, the space-time continuum, all that kind of stuff. It really is, and that's amazing.
Okay, so would you say then, for a tool to be something that you go to that's more than just a problem solver or something that you've tried out once and then just kind of set aside, because I think we've all made those kind of purchases. It has to get you, or you have to get it in a way. So what is it about, say, the CNC router? Because I know you did that as a design for a project for the magazine, Chris. But what is it that gets you, or that you get about a CNC? It just makes that natural connection.
I think I just adore the complexity of it. And maybe that's not a good answer, but it's just, there's a level of understanding and a level of depth that you have to go into it, and it never ends. You just keep going and going, and you get more of that. The more comfortable it is, the deeper you can go all the time. It's like some guys, they can spend a whole lifetime making boxes because they're always finding something fresh and new. And I think that's the way it is with the CNC machine. After years and years and years of, circular saws and things like that, I found something that just, I'll never find the end of it, ever.
Okay.
Always a new material, always a new technique.
Sure.
So for me, I think a CNC is fairly simple, though. It's that's why it's just a router moving around in 3 axes. Now, how you do that can be complex and multi-layered and all of that stuff. And it's like, there's nothing different about a CNC and a well-crafted template and a router table with a bushing and, flush cut or a flush trim bit. And it does exactly what you want it, what you tell it to do. And that's it, Now, for the record, I consider myself a baby with the CNC. I am, I would say, probably about 10 years ago, I built a CNC kit, small one, like a little 11 by 11 cut area. It's a Shapeoko 2 or whatever. And, a little Makita trim router, and that's it. That I used for a while, and then we moved, and it just never really got set back up again. Now at the Fine Woodworking shop, we just got Next Wave, and it's been an experience, and it's been one of those things where I find myself using it more than I thought I was going to. But I still, since it is at the shop at work, which is, just 10 miles away or whatever, I do find myself still reaching for and thinking, I am a huge fan of a 3D printer in a wood shop. 90% of the digital woodworking I do is 3D printer based, where I am using it to make templates. I am using it to make little bushings or tools or whatever. And for me, if I had to pick between the two, no question, 3D printer.
Okay.
It's not, and just strictly as a woodworker, it's not even in the calculation which one I would pick. It's
Okay.
a 3D printer, because there's something, and this is kind of a little passion project of mine, but I think that there's something so beautiful about the fact that somebody can buy a $200 3D printer and a $20 roll of filament and download files and make these things from all over the world, and make these things that make your shop time more enjoyable and better. And I think that is so like important to all stripes of woodworkers. And I love CNCs. They're expensive, and it's definitely not something that I think every person could have in their wood shop. Whereas a 3D printer, I think not everyone can afford it. That's a stupid statement, but most woodworkers can afford it, and I think it would make most woodworkers happy to have it if they accepted it into the reality.
Okay.
And also, I'm sorry, one more thing. There is a thing about, a CNC is mostly a 2D object, right? Or a 2D tool. You're cutting, for the most part, 2.5D. You can do 3D things with it. 98% of what happens in all of the world CNCs is 2D. Whereas a 3D printer, there is plenty, it's trivial to add that third dimension into a jig. And when that becomes an easy to do thing, a easy part of your world, you find yourself doing it all the time. Like right now, I just made a jig to trim ukulele braces right to 2 millimeters perfectly, but there's a little step down so that it notches into another jig that I have. There's, it is a 3D element. It wouldn't have worked as well if it wasn't 3D, and I wouldn't be able to do that with a CNC as easily.
All right.
Well, that's interesting. I've got a little 3D printer as well, but it's a 5x5x5 format, and so I've never really started using it for workshop things because I always felt it was a little too small. But I might have to bring it in here in the shop and actually give it a little more thought now. Because I do like your point about it being a very democratic tool in the sense of less costly.
Because I know that you've shared, Ben, in the past, was like a little bevel gauge, for the lack of better descriptor on it, for work with paper plans, right?
Yeah. I think after researching, the tool would be called a transfer bevel. Okay. And what's the hand tool manufacturer started in Seattle, moved
Blue Spruce?
Bridge City.
No.
Bridge City.
Bridge City. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bridge City made one like in the 90s, I think. And I've seen them on walls in the past, but that's one thing that I love about a 3D printer, CNC or whatever, is like you start to see a need for something and you don't just want that thing anymore. You immediately start going, how do I make that thing? And as you're doing the thing, while you're wishing you had that thing, you start to make the thing, you start to make the math, and then all of a sudden you go, wait a minute, let me just CAD that up real quick and tell my robot to make this thing while I'm doing something else. And most of the time that CAD session is and for those who don't know, CAD is computer aided design, so the program that you're using on the computer. Honestly, I'm pretty good with CAD, but I just run in and I get it done. That's a 20-minute thing, and then my robot is doing the thing for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. I don't care. I'm doing something else. So I sit there and I see the need. I wish I could take a bevel gauge and transfer this angle off of this set of plans perfectly. I don't want to measure the angle. I just want to transfer that angle. So I made a bevel gauge where both sides touch that one plane. And I print it up and I'm good to go. In the past, that would have required me going to maybe Staples would maybe have something like that for drafting plans, but it's not going to meet at a point. It's not going to, there's no way of going and getting that thing. But you see a need, you fill the need within the afternoon, and I've made countless little tools that just make my life easier. And yeah, I spend time doing it, but I enjoy it too. So that's part of my hobby.
Well, that's fun. So I'm interested in, you were mentioning CAD programming.
Yeah.
How do you feel that using 3D or rather, 3D design tools, has that changed your woodworking? Has it made you more skilled in some ways, more perceptive? I'm curious how it's affected your work.
So it's funny because you had brought up like the precision of these tools and the programs and everything. And I always equate precision with real world measurements and reality and repeatability though. And I think that my brain has had to switch a little bit out of woodworking and into engineering world. I use Fusion 360 for my CAD program, which it can be a overwhelmingly complicated program, but it can be incredibly simple too, and used as like just draw a box. I want the box to be this big by this big, and I want a circle around it and have it be this big by this big, or whatever, Do I think it's made me a better woodworker? No. I feel like most of my woodworking habits are now cemented. Where like, exact is more important than precise. As long as the pieces are flush or whatever. Like, I don't care if the drawer pocket is 16.5 inches. Make the drawer pocket, make the drawer fit the drawer pocket, or whatever. But when I use it for jigs, there's something about, I have a jig that holds my ukulele tops or my bottoms, and I have pins that are 370 millimeters apart. That is the only measurement I know on my ukuleles. Like, I literally have no idea what any other measurement is. And just because those pins register all the other things I do around that ukulele in a digital fashion. So it's like, yes, there are absolutely like very, very precise measurements that happen, but it's no different than woodworking, where it's like, what are the important measurements? Well, the important measurement is the one before me. And that jig that workboard that I made has pins that are 370 millimeters apart. So from here on out, they're all going to be 370 millimeters apart. And that's all that matters to me.
Okay. Because that's one thing that I was wondering.
Question.
No, that's fine. There are no answers. That's kind of one of the things that I wanted to talk about, is because, and you gave it a good start there, Ben, is a lot of our woodworking has a basic parameter, like a bookcase needs to fit in this particular part of the wall. But after that, you're building to fit. However, as soon as you start doing something on a CNC, as Chris alluded to earlier, all of a sudden numbers become extremely important in the design of something, or whether it's 3D printed or cut on a CNC, it's just not going to work out. So, like, Chris, how do you balance those two? How do you keep those two things in your hands at the same time?
Well, I think one of the, we talk about CAD or using CNC machines. It can be a prison. You can lose your freedom with a machine like that pretty easily. I mean, if that's the right way to put it. And I think that, for me, it's, you need to realize getting back to what Ben said, and obviously some things are important and some things don't matter. And I think it's I don't really enjoy designing something completely all the way through and then feeling trapped like I have to build that design. I think for me, it's design enough to get started on and just let the process roll. And if things need to change, they change, and I'm not going to worry about it that much. But I don't want to feel trapped by it. I think when we lose that freedom, when we become a prisoner, that's a bad thing. That's a bad part of electronic woodworking.
What do you design? What CAD program do you use?
We use Autodesk Inventor, so it's very much like Fusion 360. And I probably use 5% of it, and the rest I'm really not sure what it does, to be honest. It's about piping and electrical things and all that, and welding. So we actually use very little of it. I also had some fun with Alibri Atom, which is a simpler program, but it's they all have the advantage of just helping you conceptualize.
Yeah.
And maybe that's what I was alluding to. And how does a CAD program help or change your woodworking? I think for me at least, it helps me conceptualize the idea of a jig, a tool, a part that would be otherwise difficult. And it forces me to confront reality. I mean, I can draw really cool things on a legal pad, but are they really going to work out? Sometimes not. But when I hit that CAD program, I got to make the tough decisions, and so it's a case of having to make the decisions, confronting the reality. But it's you got to really find that balance, don't you? There's a beauty in just a pencil line and a bandsaw cut, as well as a beauty to a precise CNC cut.
So one thing that I think that digital woodworking though does help, especially in the design sense, is changes cost nothing.
Oh yeah,
right. And I don't know if Inventor had if it is. But Fusion, if used in a particular way, and for the listeners, Fusion 360, you can get a personal license for free. It's a free program. Parametric modeling is a big part of Fusion, where if you do it right, and this is what I have struggled with. I used to be a whiz at SketchUp. I could sketch up that thing over in the corner in 20 minutes. And Fusion, there was a learning curve, and it was learning how to use it in a parametric sense, but that's what made it so powerful, where I want this hole to be offset from this side X amount, right? And when you put it in, you say 1 inch. But then later on, you can get a little spreadsheet of your measurements, and you can say, wait a minute, you know what? The dowels I got at the hardware store are undersized. They're not 1 inch. They're undersized by 20 thou or 20, and we've all been there. So you do a test piece, and you tell you fit it, and it doesn't work. So then you just punch into the computer all of those holes. They're not 1 inch. Make them 1 inch minus 20 thousandths. And for the record, for your audience, I'm imperial right now, and this is a struggle. but like, that's the beauty of parametric design, where all of these changes are so simple. I mean, I just grabbed a thing that's right in front of me, but this little thing, and especially with the 3D printer, I hit print, and it is printed in 45 minutes, and I can look at it, and I can measure it, and I can put it on the thing. And if it's not right, I am out 28 cents maybe. At this thing, 15 cents. And there's no barrier to making the design change, to making the thing a little bit better. And when you're working strictly analog, there's more time put into every iteration. And I think that becomes part of the math. I keep talking about math, but that becomes part of what you think about. Like, do I really want to go through making another mock-up? Well,
right. Or do you even do the mock-up and just jump right
and just
into
build.
it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I guess that would be the one thing that I would think would probably change people as a woodworker is maybe feeling like they have the opportunity to take some of those early iterative steps without, like you said, Ben, costing anything, rather than, because I think there's all of us have a desire at some point to just like, I'm just going to start building. And you just kind of jump in and you're cutting wood and putting stuff together. And at that point, you're kind of committed to it, or it's in the burn pile.
How do you do it, Phil? I mean, like when you're, because you have to, both of you have to do things to, when you build something, many times it's being built by, once you're done, by thousands of people after you. And so you can't just wing it, really, right?
No, and thankfully we have people like Chris and John and Dylan who run through the kind of the design process on it, and they'll have meetings with the editors on what kind of needs the project needs to serve, has to fulfill. But then we also, like Mark and Steve, that's the noise you hear in the background building a project, where they're in the middle of taking Chris's drawings for a 10-drawer dresser. And no doubt later today, they're going to come to him and tell him something that they think should be a little bit different on it. And then he goes back and alters the drawings on it. And in that sense, but yeah, I mean, I've done some personal projects and done them on the show or on video, and yeah, it's been a little bit of a stumbling thing because you kind of just get through it, and then afterwards you have to kind of go back and
and wish you could build it again. Yeah,
right. Falsify your results just to make it look like it matched.
I can't tell you how many falsified results we have in the where it's like, I should have done this.
Yes. Yeah.
But that's kind of the beauty of the process that we're talking about, is that it's very organic. We have those files, we can make changes, we can create one new part, and it's not a huge commitment in time at that point because we've got the documentation down. There are too many projects where you start and it's not right, but you just keep going because you just don't want to rebuild everything, because there's some rotten part that you had to drill 5 holes, scroll saw between, spend a long time sanding. It's just like, no, I'm not going to do that again. So you put up with what's wrong. Unfortunately, we don't always have to do that. So I think that's one thing I would bring out about all this. It makes the process of developing something new, whether it's a tool or a piece of furniture, an organic process.
Do you ever find yourself, because I do this, and now again, most of what I do is for personal reasons. It's not being broadcast outside of Instagram, but I will make the thing and then say, oh, there's one little change, and I'll make the change in CAD and never print it or CNC it, or never, because the penultimate version was just fine, and it'll get me through what I needed to do, but I have to go back in and change it just in case.
Because it could be better.
Yes.
Yeah. No, we do that too, where we'll build a project, and in the use of the project after it gets built and, we're photographing it or something like that, we'll be like, this pivot point could actually be better if it was another 3/4 of an inch over. And we'll change that in the file and then in the drawings that go in the magazine. But the project doesn't get rebuilt because, from 6 feet away, nobody's going to know 3/4 of an inch, so functionally there's that difference. So that kind of leads me to, with regular woodworking, for lack of a better word, you make templates for projects and patterns and stuff like that, and you get done with the project and you're kind of faced with do I keep these in case I ever make it again, or what, and then where do you store them, and that kind of thing. But in the kind of tools that we're looking at, you get to keep that all the time, and you don't have to worry about where it goes.
Yeah. I've 3D printed stuff. I have gotten to the point where if it's I use different colors for printing. My instrument jigs are generally printed in red filament, and those go in a drawer. And then if I do an iteration, because if I can just pull the thing out of the drawer and use it, I want to do that. I don't necessarily want to print all my jigs again as I'm going. And also I am likely going to build, I build a very particular instrument. I build baritone ukuleles, and I'm likely going to build another 50 of them before I die, so some of the things make sense to have on hand to build that same exact size and the same exact thing. But yeah, one thing I love is that it's like, you don't have all of the things with keep written all over them. That little piece of like white pine with like weird 2 kerfs in it, and you're like, keep. And then 3 years later, you have no idea why.
Yeah.
So
that kind of affects shop decor when you don't have nails with things hanging on them all over the place. Sort of the clean screen type deal, only for a workshop.
Good and bad, because sometimes those leg templates on people's walls are just too photographic for to handle.
Thank you to Titebond. You want a glue that you can trust, and fortunately, Titebond has the glue you need to get the job done with confidence. From interior glues with strong initial tack and short clamp time to exterior glues with exceptional strength and water resistance. Look to Titebond, the right glue for your next project. For more information, visit titebond.com. So this is what I'm wondering, because I mean, there's a perception that digital woodworking is just kind of pushing a button and cabinet comes out the other end or whatever. And both of you in the past, pre 3D printer, pre CNC, have been kind of building jigs and building tools to go. Have you seen how these digital tools have allowed you to become even more of a tool maker in a certain sense?
I think the fact that I can work with different materials more easily. I mean, I think a revelatory moment for me was years ago in ShopNotes. We were doing a shoulder plane, double dovetailed. And I'd made like 2 prototypes, 2 final versions, a set of sides for photography. And the art director said, well, I need another set of sides. And it's just like, no, I'm not going to cut another. I'm not going to do this again. My hands hurt. The files are dull. No. And so I didn't really know anything about cutting metal, but I fired up our little ShopBot desktop we have, and I cut them out. It worked somehow, and it was like, the light from above came down, because this was an amazing way to create that prototype, to create part of a tool, which would have been a considerable amount of time and effort for me. So, it's nice to think about sitting in that perfect New England shop with the birds outside and the deer in the pasture. But you know what? Reality is there's only so much time, so much effort, so much of everything. And if I can make that beautiful hand plane I always wanted with a little bit of help, why not? Because it's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's there was a nobody cares how outside of the craftsperson. Nobody cares how the thing is made, right?
Right.
Like, it doesn't make it more anything, more beautiful, more usable or functional. It doesn't make it more anything outside how it was made. So the calculation that you have to make is, am I making this more than once? Am I making this to do a certain thing? But if you want to make a jig that you're going to use over and over and over, and maybe want to tweak, and that's where everything gets smart, gets more efficient, is when you tweak it. You just load up another sheet on the CNC, and you cut it out again, and you got another thing with a little bit of a difference. But that hand plane doesn't function better or worse based on whether it was the sides were cut on a CNC or not. So I will never hold it against anyone for not wanting to use a CNC if that's not the way that they enjoy their shop time, right?
Right.
The same way I hear all the time people say, like, well, I sit and stare at a computer all day and I don't want to do that. And I totally understand that. But for me, when I'm like digging into a fusion thing on CAD, my brain is working the same exact way as it is when I am taking one last shaving with my number 3, or like just trying to get, like, you know, sometimes I'm truing up a board and trying to get that perfectly straight edge, you know, with a hand plane or whatever. And my brain functions this way, but when I am in Fusion or CAD or SketchUp or whatever, I have the same feeling of enjoyment of my shop time. Now, I work from home in this seat, and I CAD in this seat. I'm in my personal shop, right? But so there generally is like 4:30, 5 o'clock comes, like I walk around and I do some other stuff. I go inside, check on the family, and then I come back out, and it's like kind of a reset moment for me. I do switch computers. I have, but my
kind of like a Mr. Rogers kind of thing. You unzip the cardigan and you take off the shoes, and
it's the same screen, but I just hit a button and I hit a button. It's like,
that's funny.
Back
That's funny.
Desktop. But it's for me the same enjoyment. So there's nothing wrong with me enjoying my screen time in a different way. Same way there's nothing wrong with, you know, somebody flattening a board with a hand plane, and I think that's kind of weird, you know? So it's just however you enjoy your shop time, enjoy your shop time.
Yeah. Well, I also feel like there's two different sorts of people, broadly speaking, that are getting into digital woodworking. You have somebody who is a woodworker, mm-hmm. who sees it as a woodworking tool and comes into it. So I feel like the obstacle then is the software part of it. But then you have the people who are in front of a screen every day. They grew up in front of screens. Their work is that way. They think in terms of functionality and parameters and that kind of stuff. So the software comes easy. It's the tool part that's hard.
Yeah.
You know, so it's more of like a perspective change, I guess. You know,
and they're always at odds. I don't know if you at Woodsmith and ShopNotes have the same. I'm sure we share an audience demographic with Fine Woodworking, but we have a lot of engineers. You know, people are day job engineers, and then at night they go out to the wood shop. And we had a class that we did with Pekovic, and we had a lot of engineers in the online class, and or in that cohort, and they kept asking specific, like, how many thousands, blah blah, and Mike is not that. He's like, are you blah, blah, blah. No, like he doesn't like measuring it, like numbers drive him nuts. But eventually he just like sucked it up, and somebody said, when you tap your table saw fence, how far is it moving? And so he was like, that's it. I'm gonna cut and measure. I'm gonna cut and measure, and he goes, it's about 2 thousandths every tap. And some people need to know, oh, I just saw him tap his fence 3 times. It probably moved around 6 thousandths of an inch. I wish I knew it was 6 thousandths of an inch, you know? So, but I think the point that I'm getting at is, for me, I don't think I'm as precise as Chris is. My job at the end of the day is to make an ukulele that plays and sounds good. And that's what matters most to me. Precision is great. Yes, I want the joints. I want that neck joint to fit perfectly. I don't want there to be a gap because that hurts my soul. But I use 3D printed jigs to make that happen. So I want gapless. I want perfect. I want it to be nice, but the exact precision doesn't matter to me as much. But I think all of it to say, I generally come at it from the more organic side, and have learned to use the precise numbers when they benefit. This is a little jig I made that I'm holding it up, and the audio only audience is annoyed at me. But it's a little jig I made just to clamp some stringing, 5 pieces of stringing together to make a rosette and an ukulele. And yes, the gap is 2.7 millimeters, but that's only because I measured 5 pieces of stringing, and the computer needs a number.
Right.
It has to have a number. You can't go about this big. It needs a number. So the only reason it's 2.7 millimeters and I'm that exact with it is because that's what the thing was. So the gap still equals the stringing. I just have to tell the computer a number to translate it. So there is precision involved, but it is the important part is still that it's exact and fits. Exact is not precise, and precise is this is weird. I'm sorry.
No, definitions get a little weird.
Yeah.
No, it's interesting. You mentioned the engineers and so forth. So there's in this world there are very analytical people where everything has to be just so or they explode, and then you've got the more laid back where make it fit whatever, and I think that it's I find myself being both people, which maybe that's a need for therapy. I don't know, but. When I do my wood carving and so forth, I don't want to know numbers. I don't care. It either looks right or it doesn't look right. And of course, at other times with tool making, I want precision. And I think it's sort of a question of how does each group view digital woodworking then? Do the engineers look at it as, my God, how else would you do it? And it's wonderful because it is precise. Is it an anathema to the creative types who just it is what it is, when Fusion 360 is not that way, as you know. Yeah. Inventor isn't that way. I wish it would be kind of, whatever type program, and it's not. You have to put that number in. So it is a different approach.
But it's also a little, you also have to understand, like you said, Ben, you have to put a number in, but to an extent, the number doesn't really matter. You're just putting in a number because it needs one. And you were going for specific fit because you had the size of your stringing, but there's other details you could make where you just put a number in and it is what it is. It doesn't have to be, 6 radians off of whatever. One thing though that I do love about like that stringing example is I wanted the stringing to terminate to just stop, right? And 5-piece stringing, in a federal card table, I don't know if I've seen 5-piece stringing in a federal card table, but 3-piece stringing or something like that will rarely just stop. It'll stop, and then there will be a little dot inlaid over the end of it, right? To cover up that termination, because it's really, really hard to get something to get 3 things to just stop when you're putting them in good. Individually. Yes. And have it be on. My creativity wanted it to just stop. And the woodworker said, well, you can't because you're going to fit each piece in individually and they're not going to go together perfect. It's never going to go in perfect. And then the digital mind of me said, well, wait, if I make a bent lamination of those 5 pieces, I could just cut it off at one spot. Now I got to nail 1 chisel cut. I don't need to nail 5, just 1. And I was able to do that easier. I could have done that with other methods. I was able to do that without leaving my house because I had the thing in CAD and I said, oh, let me just print this thing, and boom, 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 boom. An hour later, I'm there. So I think that the precision can make you a more creative person and allow you to release yourself from constraints. Yes, sometimes it is a
a jail cell. And sometimes you start to think outside of your teachings. Could Steve Latta have done 5 pieces of stringing and nailed the termination at the end? Yes. I'm not going to be the first one to say Ben Strano is no Steve Latta. Okay.
But Steve Latta is more likely to have a 2.7 millimeter chisel to nail the chisel cut than you are.
I do have a 2.5 millimeter chisel.
He threw you a line there. He threw you a line, Ben.
Well, this is a much more prosaic example, but I had Chris create a CNC router bit storage rack for a tool cart that we did on the TV show. And I needed a variety of holes for 1/4-inch bits, 1/2-inch bits. I have a couple of 3/8 shank and some 5/16 shank bits and whatever. And for people who have made router bit storage racks, you can't drill the hole at a 1/2 inch and 1/4 of an inch because you'll never get the bit out. And if you do, probably in there you've sliced up one or more of your fingers when it's, so you want that hole just that much bigger than 1/4 and a 1/2. 1/4-inch bit, just a bit larger than 1/4 of an inch, you can find that. 1/2-inch bit, no. You're looking around all over the place. But Chris was able to say, well, it's just a couple of thousandth over, and then you just use the CNC to make it. And now I have those bits that just drop in right where they need to. I can pull them out without, needing a tube of, Neosporin or something like that. And there you go.
I've actually, so I have a, for nut files, which, very precise gauged files for the string nut on a stringed instrument. I wanted to make a little rack, and this was one of my how complicated can I make this fusion project? So I made the thing so that you type in how many files you have and the size of each file, and it just makes the thing. Like parametric beyond reasonable. But it was like a Saturday morning, ooh, this is gonna be fun. Let's dig into this because I'm a dork. But one of my parameters was slop. So I figured out how much slop I needed in the 3D print to make the file come in and out easily. And then, I even just used that as a perimeter where it's like each slot is 24 thousandths plus slop. And so that winds up being, I don't remember what it was, but yeah. The slop aspect is a fun thing to program in.
There you go. I feel like, having that software element for digital woodworking also gives you the time to have, or the opportunity to have shop time when you can't have shop time. You're sick and just kind of need to lay on the couch and whatever, but laptop or your tablet and your software program, and you're still getting a little shop time in there.
Yeah.
Well, it's definitely the sketch pad or the legal pad for our times to be able to work with in CAD.
I that's one thing. Soon I need to get a laptop because, my son will be in the living room, my wife's in her studio, but they're still close-ish, and I feel like me out in the separate building, even though I'm 100 feet away. There is a point in the day where I wish I was just in the house and hearing them, and I totally feel like if I had a laptop to do CAD, to do Fusion on, I would use it for that a lot, to be in the element at least.
Sure. Do you also, true confession time, do you use some of the software tools because of our work from home situation that you can have shop time in the middle of a meeting?
I don't comment. Fusion. Well, I work in my shop, so
Right.
like if we have like an all hands meeting or something like that, and I can turn my video off, I am walking around cleaning my shop while I'm in that meeting. So that's the best use of shop time of meeting time. I'm sorry, meeting time. Yeah,
That's true. We had a all company meeting here, and I was in the video studio, and we had one of our monitors on the meeting, and it was just the presentation from the C-level folk, and so all of us were muted and cameras off and kind of a thing. So I was listening and participating in the meeting as I needed to, but finishing up a little narrow belt sander from TV show props and working on another TV show thing, and sharpened a couple of my tools, and so
that's work. That counts.
Yeah, professional development is how I look at it.
There you go.
Yeah, and that's another thing. I'll I'm very lucky. We got the CNC down at the shop or something like that, and it's like somebody's got to figure it out. So, oh no, I have to cut out a bunch of ukulele forms or something like that. And, it's
it's research. It counts.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm working.
Well, tough it out.
Yeah.
Now, fun fact: the manual that you were looking at for the Next Wave machine, there, Chris was the architect of that bad boy.
It was good.
Well, God, I'm glad to hear that.
That's great. All right, that was a good. Yeah. Now, I want to know more about, because I've been watching your Thursdays the shop updates.
Yeah.
I want to know more about the CNC I'm going to build, though, because
Okay.
I want to be able to build a C. I have very specific size CNC, so I'm going to have to build it.
Cool project.
What's happening? I just threw it over to a Ford promo for you, Phil.
Well, what's really funny is that Chris and I are in the same building, just different rooms here, and in between where we are is our photo studio, and we have the new CNC machine is getting prettyified for its photography. So I think Chris got it. I think you got all of the electrical innards in it, right? Mm-hmm. Yesterday?
Yes. So I'm just trying to kind of make the final connection between the machine itself and the software. It's a new software I haven't used before. So the configuring of the machine takes a little bit of time. So I'm stumbling my way through it, but it'll be up and running here.
Okay.
So will people be able to build it without a CNC? Is my question.
Of course. That's
is it that workbench project that you need a workbench to build? Or
No, I tell you. Now, truth be told, we did make a couple of parts using one of our CNCs here just to speed things along. But the point of the whole project is to be able to use an average shop and average skills, yet produce a precision machine. And it's very doable. And it's really just a matter of, we talked earlier about what is precision and about just not being too held prisoner by a set of plans or expectations of things. So as you work along, you're really creating the precision necessary for the machine by working to the project itself.
Okay.
As an example, setting the motors and the lead screws need to be in a precise location. Well, everything has a bracket with oversized holes, and we're able to just move parts around and have it go. Things go into the place they need to go because it's engaging with the other parts, with the balance of the machine. So it's very much meant to be a project which anyone can do.
Yeah, and I thought what was kind of interesting in seeing this one getting made was you were designing it, Mark was building it, and you had kind of thought that you would use one of our CNC machines behind you to cut out some parts. But Mark was working so fast, he was actually cutting those parts. So we didn't need the CNC for some of them that he was going along. It's very much a kind of a cut and paste. There were those, we had them when I was in college one year for finals as a stress reliever, one of those paper model books where you cut out all these little different layers of airplane models, glued them all together in a lamination, and then we flew them outside on in the plaza in between exams. And that's how I feel like the CNC machine is. You just cut out these pieces, you glue them together or screw them together. And it's, there's no complicated joinery on this thing. It's mostly plywood rectangles, or, the shapes of some parts are only there just to provide clearance. There's nothing precise about them or whatever. You could change the shape of it if you wanted to. But yeah, and then to watch Mark be able to take it and have the gantry that kind of like juddered its way down the line, and then all of a sudden he made like 3 adjustments, and then you could just push it back and forth with a finger.
So and the rails are all just 90-degree aluminum extrusion, huh?
Yeah,
that's correct. It runs on so there's V bearings, which run on the corner, then the outside corner has some 61 aluminum. And that's all there is to it. We've done this. We've had machines, a couple of them running for many years, and it works well, wears well. Part of the precision that we're getting in a homemade machine with simple bearings is we're able to preload and put some pressure on everything through some cams. So rather than having things rattle, you use a cam. It pushes the bearing against the rail, and you've got forces in opposition, and everything just smooths out, and it's easy to adjust. Because part of the reason for why I wanted to build a machine. I mean, obviously it's a good nerd project and it's fun, but 2 things: these CNC machines can be very expensive, prohibitively expensive, and what's the fun of that? It's not fun. I wanted to make a machine that was a small d democratic CNC router that anyone could build with a reasonable amount of money. And so we talk about V bearings and plywood. These are all simple materials and not that pricey. But who wants a junky machine? You want something that's, the ideal is cheap, easy to build, and great running. And that's the challenge of it. And I think we've done a pretty good job hitting that.
Well, I have over here, shop storage, nuts and bolts hardware, and the top of it would be the perfect size if it were a CNC deck, and on top of that I have a go bar deck, which is for clamping things on a flat surface of a ukulele, using sticks as clamps, and you have to have the thing to pry the stick up to. And I'm just sitting here thinking, like, that would be the perfect size to build a CNC on that counter, and then I could just move the gantry over and keep my go bar deck on top, suspended from the ceiling, and use it for 2 purposes,
Sure,
but
of course.
There's so many times that I wish, because I preach about 3D printing so much, but one huge aspect, and as you know, Chris, is the size. My 3D printer, I just got a new one. It's 250 by 250 millimeters, so 9.5 inches by 9.5 inches. And there's so many times that the thing ain't gonna fit there,
Right.
So that's where having a CNC sitting right there is exciting. And I'm not joking. I am eagerly anticipating the shop notes coming out, and I'm going to be taking notes and probably building one. So
excellent.
Well, that would be super. It is a super cool project, and you mentioned just the format size. These desktop CNC routers are fun, but you can only do so much, and having that extra capacity is a big deal. And so building it yourself, hey, you get plenty of capacity.
And then how it goes together. So if at one point you need to make it smaller or you need to make it bigger, you just do that, right?
Yeah. I mean, the structure is very flexible. I mean, ours is designed for a 25 by 49 inch format right now, but you want to shrink it a little bit, no problem. Yeah. Or make it a little longer or a little shorter. There really isn't that much to change. It's just, hacking some parts a little shorter. And
updates in the programming?
No, I mean that's all that'll remain the same.
Okay, all right. So it has end stops or all that stuff. So if the rails are different, because the brain works is where I get weird about building a thing.
Okay, yeah. Well, you mentioned the things like limiting switches and such. This is just a very basic machine.
Okay.
And if you want to add limit switches and that sort of thing, and if you want to go ahead and program in the soft limits and all that good stuff, you can. But the machine itself, it's meant to be, as I said, it's meant to be something that's accessible for anybody. So I didn't want to go off the deep end.
Yeah.
With too many things. We just want something that's very, very basic, hardworking, rugged, and it does fulfill that. And then if you want to blitz it up, that's just fine. I'm all for it. Racing stripes, metallic paint. I think I've always wanted like a flashing yellow light when it's in use. Like forklifts have and things like that. No backup alarm, but
that would be awesome. Just a little yellow light just swirling around on it.
Yeah.
That would be.
And I'm thinking some background music that plays as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because CNCs don't make enough noise as it is. That is one thing that I wish was different. Is like there is just that drone that goes on with a CNC, and you do need some good hearing protection. So.
Yeah, that's for sure. I keep my pet dog in here, and they're a little too far for me to reach. But you know what? I've got dog hearing protectors because it's that loud. I keep
wanting to get some for in here too. Yeah. Good.
I was surprised. Like Nicholas takes it too. Like I totally expected you to put those on and he to be like rubbing them off or something. Mm-hmm. But he sat there. He took it just fine.
No, he's working on his his status as the Woodsmith dog here.
Okay. Shop dog.
Yep.
And
we'll get him an official
loves
bandana.
Yep. Everybody needs shop dog.
All right, well, there you go. If you have any questions, comments, or smart remarks about today's episode, you can leave them on the YouTube channel in the comments section, or you can send us an email, woodsmith@woodsmith.com. As we alluded to, got an upcoming issue of ShopNotes Magazine with part 1 of our CNC build. One of the big things on it is this version, you can tile pieces, so it's 2 feet wide, but 690 feet long is the pieces that you can deal with on there. So the other thing is that it's got a vertical clamping feature so that you can deal with end grain or vertically held pieces and machine the end of them there. So the previous version of our CNC machine is still in use in the shop, and Chris has routed a ridiculous amount of aluminum and brass on it, and it does its job extremely well. So you want to keep an eye out for that. Thanks to Titebond for sponsoring today's episode. Check out their full line of glues. We rely on them here all the time at Woodsmith, and you can see it at titebond.com. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Ben.